Scariest. What is your creepiest UFO sighting or alien abduction story? Story 1. This is something my father once shared with me, and it's the scariest UFO story I've ever heard. It happened in Ethiopia during the 1960s when my father was just a kid. He and his best buddy Gabriel were playing in the enclosed backyard of my father's house. My father turned away briefly, and when he looked back, Gabriel had disappeared into the darkness. Both my father and Gabriel came from rich and powerful families. My father's dad was the Minister of Interior in Ethiopia, and Gabriel's dad was a high-ranking general. The backyard where Gabriel disappeared was surrounded by 10-foot-tall brick walls, with guards patrolling the outside like creepy sentinels. Hours went by and there was no sign of Gabriel, leaving everyone worried. Their parents, along with the guards, searched everywhere, but there was still no sign of Gabriel. It's as if he was swallowed by the mysterious void. Within 48 hours, a nationwide search for the general's son was underway, but the uncertainty hung over them like a ghostly presence. The news reported his disappearance, and the police went from door to door describing him and what Gabriel was wearing when he vanished. His private school uniform with a white shirt and brown pants. Even helicopters searched the countryside, yet there was no sign of him, only the haunting absence. Months went by, and as time passed, hope turned into a memory, fading into despair. People whispered about something evil at play. Then all of a sudden, exactly 6 months after the day of his disappearance, Gabriel reappeared in my father's backyard. My father said his buddy cast a chilling presence in the scene. He was dressed in the same white shirt and brown pants from his school uniform, still looking the same as when he had vanished. He seemed like he just came out after being frozen in time. Once they made sure Gabriel was safe, they asked him where he had been during those 6 months. He told them about his strange adventure where mysterious men took him to a place surrounded by darkness. He described a brightly lit room where he met children from different countries, their eyes filled with secrets. It surprised him that those men, who appeared to be of European descent, could speak Ethiopian, their words echoing like mystical whispers. He could also understand the other children, even though they weren't Ethiopian, as if they were connected by a strange language. The white room had no windows, and the doors blended into the walls like something from a horror story. There were buttons on the walls, and if a child pressed one, a bed would come out of the wall like a ghostly apparition. Gabriel said he suddenly found himself in a city that was shining with an unnatural light and was unnaturally clean. Cars zipped around and the people there looked strange, like us but with creepy differences, as if they were from a parallel, unsettling universe. One of the shadowy men stayed with him and took him to a towering building, a symbol of dread. Gabriel explained that he had to stay there for some time, locked in a room filled with disturbing amusements. Gabriel said that by pressing a button, the room could transport him to different places, an open field, the beach, or even the sky, but all of them felt like realms of torment. He felt that only a couple of hours had passed when he was brought back to Ethiopia and reappeared in the backyard, his very soul tainted by the frightening experience. He thought he'd been away for just a short time, but he returned as a shadow of his former self. Sadly, no one believed his scary story. Ethiopia was a deeply religious country, and most of the adults believed he had been affected by evil forces, a vessel for the darkness that exists beyond human understanding. Gabriel was even forced to see a priest to rid his soul of the suspected evil entities. My father stayed in touch with Gabriel throughout their lives, but their connection was haunted by that fateful day. Gabriel pursued a doctorate in physics, but his mind was forever marked by the indelible darkness of that otherworldly encounter. To this day, his story remains a chilling mystery, a haunting reminder of the unspeakable mysteries that exist in the cosmos. One of the most bizarre aspects of this story is that my father doesn't believe in anything strange or supernatural, so for me, hearing him tell this story was really haunting. That boy's trip was really strange. What if there really is a multiverse and there are other galactic civilizations out there? Besides, I exist. Story 2. This happened to me in the early 2000s when I was a teenager. Me, my brother, a friend, and my friend's father were out fishing in Lake Okeechobee in Florida. My friend's father had a big pontoon houseboat, so we decided to spend the entire night out there. As the night wore on, the father retired to his bunk, and it was around 2 a.m. when I decided to turn in for some rest. I had barely closed my eyes for about 5 minutes when my brother and our friend entered the cabin and roused me from my slumber. Since I hadn't drifted off into sleep just yet, I quickly stood from a makeshift bed. We went out to the deck and both of them pointed to the west, directing my attention to the night sky. There, an unsettling, otherworldly orangish-blue sphere hovered, its movement resembling a ghostly dance, swaying gently from side to side. We stood there, spellbound, staring at it for what felt like an eternity. The most eerie thing about this mysterious object was that, as we watched, it changed into different colors. It shifted from a shade of orange to a spectral blue, then to a ghostly greenish hue, and back again. There was no discernible pattern to these creepy color changes, and it seemed like it defied the laws of nature by moving in unpredictable directions. After several minutes of this haunting spectacle, it abruptly streaked away and vanished into the darkness of the night. Now, we were not under the influence of any substances, and all three of us bore witness to this strange phenomenon. It sent shivers down our spines and a feeling of dread crept over us. Yet, despite the anxiety it caused, we couldn't deny that it was an undeniably mesmerizing, haunting experience. Sadly, I can offer no logical explanation for what we saw that night. One thing's for sure, though. It most certainly was not a helicopter or a plane. Story 3. My experience took place in 1996. At the time, I was working as a pizza delivery guy. I had just completed a delivery and was on my way back to the store. While driving along the highway, I noticed 3 stationary lights in the sky, arranged almost in a row. It was evening and the dark sky allowed the stars to be visible. The first thing that came into my mind was that they might be lights from planes heading to the airport, as they shone much brighter than the stars. They seemed still due to my highway driving, which played tricks on my mind. However, in the following minutes, while I continued down the highway, the center light began to ascend, forming a triangular shape. I kept my eyes on the distant triangle of lights as the entire formation started descending into the sky. Eventually, I lost sight of the object behind trees and other obstructions and returned to work. I was really confused by the whole experience, but I didn't share it with anyone because I was afraid they'd think I was delusional. I even doubted myself, thinking I might have imagined it all. Strangely, I still remember this detail. Yes, it happened about a week before the Super Bowl, possibly on the Friday just before. All I recall is that before the Super Bowl, I was watching the Sci-Fi Channel. They were airing a show about people who had encountered UFOs and similar phenomena. I'd always been skeptical at best. However, during the program, they featured a segment on numerous sightings of triangular-shaped lights. They even showed clips of a few instances caught on video. It was exactly what I had witnessed. I've never seen anything like it since, and I didn't hear of anyone else reporting strange sightings that weekend, but then again, I was a naive early 20s kid who didn't pay much attention to local news. One thing's for sure though, I'll never forget that incident. Story 4. I never thought I'd ever have a mysterious time skip story, but it happened. It was December 29, 2001. At 6 p.m., my 2 friends and I left my house, riding our bikes to the woods down the block. We stayed there for a while. One of my friends was playfully tapping the frozen lake with a fence pole we had found, and I was 20 feet away from him, stargazing. Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me. I jumped to my feet and ran to my friend, but I found myself standing across the frozen lake again. We checked the time, it was already 8:15 p.m. There was no way to explain how 2 hours could have passed. The woods were just a few blocks from our house. Then all 3 of us witnessed the most bizarre shooting star stretching from one end of the horizon to the other. We could even hear it falling. We hid in the woods and observed a star slowly gliding across the sky. The star appeared to be an ordinary one, moving slowly, which led me to believe it was a satellite, but then it abruptly stopped. This incident took place in the United States, a couple of counties away from New York City. That was it, a haunting experience where 2 hours strangely vanished. We never hung out there again after that weird event, but we always made a point to visit the spot every December 29th, marking the anniversary of the strange day. The weird thing seemed to have happened again on December 29, 2010. We saw what seemed to be a firework shooting off about 40 feet away, but it made absolutely no sound. This got me stumped. They knew that something was wrong with that sudden time skip, but they weren't able to put their finger on it. Do you ever feel like the aliens are among us? If you do, then give this video a like and subscribe to my channel now. Story 5. Most of the unsettling experiences I've had involved at least one other person. The first 2 events occurred in consecutive days back in 1997, and the other encounters took place within a 90-day span about a year and a half ago. I have no memory of being taken or abducted during any of these incidents, and I reported them to the less than capable Mutual UFO Network. In 1997, my buddy and I had just finished our shift at a pizza place. It was past 11 p.m., and we were tired and eager to unwind. We were completely sober at the time, so we decided to head out to a cornfield during its off-season, filled with rye. We were about half a mile away from the nearest road, surrounded by darkness. Given our vantage point, I could spot headlights in any direction for a mile. Since we were deep in the countryside, we didn't have any concerns about being caught. As my buddy began breaking up grass, I suddenly noticed what I thought were truck headlights coming from behind, making a sharp left turn and vanishing. My friend didn't seem to pay it any mind, but I felt a growing sense of anxiety, thinking it might be the police. He assumed I was joking and continued breaking up some lousy brick grass. Then I found myself staring at the stars, focusing on one in particular for some reason. After about 30 seconds, that seemingly ordinary star began to move strangely, shifting up and down, side to side, in circles. I panicked and shouted, "What the heck is that?" My friend ignored it with a sigh, but then turned to look at where I was pointing. For the next 5 minutes, we watched in shock as what seemed like a UFO performed fluid, impossible maneuvers in complete silence. Without warning, this single object transformed into 5 equally astonishing star-like objects, which remained close together. They moved in formation at times and independently at others. Just as suddenly as the 5 had appeared, they merged back into one. We were shocked, but we didn't feel threatened. We discussed what we had witnessed while the original UFO remained visible but relatively still. We believed it might be ending, but we were mistaken. This time, that single object split into at least 7. Their movements began to feel aggressive. Their friend must have sensed the same tension because he mentioned feeling nervous to me. That's when I suggested we leave and said that I had a gut feeling the UFO was there for us, which filled me with fear. We left in a hurry and this object followed us to the outskirts of town. On the night following the previous story, the same buddy and I walked across my apartment complex to visit a neighbor who was preparing to grill some burgers. The sun was just setting on a humid midsummer afternoon. We knocked on the door and my neighbor, Ray, invited us in. Along with him were his girlfriend, her sister, and some random guy I didn't know. I went out back with Ray to chat while he fired up the grill. It was just the 2 of us, so I took the opportunity to tell him about the previous night's encounter. The stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky, and I excitedly told him about the bizarre event. As I neared the end of my story, I pointed to a star so Ray would understand what I was describing. Still quite shaken from the previous night, I was animated while sharing the story. Ray, however, began scanning the sky, looking in every direction, and became instantly paranoid. In the middle of my sentence, he pointed to the northeast and told me, "Like that? Right there?" It sent shivers down my spine, and I yelled for everyone inside to come out. The others joined us, and the same pattern in the sky I had seen the previous night began to appear. This went on for a while, but eventually, everyone except Ray and I went back inside. We had our burgers while watching this strange phenomenon. Behind Ray's apartment was a field, and on the other side of the field, about 300 yards away, was a tree line and a creek. Beyond that tree line lay another field. This creepy object descended slowly towards the tree line, and I rushed to the back door to call everyone back outside. We all watched as a large fiery orb in complete silence landed on the other side of the tree line. Even when we lost direct sight of it, we could still see its lights through the trees. And just before the light vanished, it boosted. We kept asking each other if it was real. After several minutes and with darkness fully enveloping the scene, nothing unusual occurred. People went in and out of the house. At one point, I was standing in front of the back door chatting with Ray's girlfriend in the kitchen, while Ray, my buddy from the previous night, and the girlfriend's sister were outside. Suddenly, my buddy muttered, "Oh shoot," and darted past me, with his sister following closely. Ray pushed me toward the door, nearly falling on top of me. The girlfriend screamed, slammed the door shut, and locked it. We all stepped away from the door. After some confused discussion about what had just happened, we concluded that what we saw out there was a four-legged creature covered in brown fur, which had attempted to attack us. This apartment was a townhouse, so we went upstairs to get a better view. There in the shadows, the creature paced around, vigilant. This is where they entered the scene. Emerging from the darkness were short beings standing at around 3 feet tall, with a grayish skin tinged with a touch of Caucasian color. These were short grays. There were several of them. Meanwhile, the animal-like creature began climbing a utility pole. This wasn't a standard utility pole. It had 6 or 8 transformers on it, an H shape, and was relatively low. As the creature ascended, I witnessed it undergo a transformation of sorts. It chose to perch on one of the crossbeams, fixing its gaze on us, but its attention appeared to be more focused on the extraterrestrials. It acted like a guard dog, for lack of a better term. The Greys were clothed and carried some kind of instrument. They seemed engrossed by the field, glancing at us occasionally, but mainly focused on something else. This continued for hours. Eventually, we all headed downstairs. Every so often, I would check to see if they were still there. Once the coast was clear, I sprinted back home. And that was the extent of it. For the next 4 years, I believe these incidents were random occurrences. It wasn't until I met my biological father for the very first time during a dinner and wine gathering with my ex-wife that she jokingly brought up my UFO stories. Story 6. Last Halloween, my friends and I gathered on a dock, preparing to launch some fireworks. We'd all just arrived and were busy with casual conversation, wondering if anyone else would join us. My buddy and I were gazing up at the stars when, right above a hill behind our town, we observed an unusual sight. It had a bluish-gray hue, but what truly confused us was the presence of a metallic rainbow-colored halo encircling it, resembling the shape of a magnetic field, similar to the Earth's magnetic field. At first, it simply hung there, motionless. Then it began to move, following a wavering path from east to west. When it reached the edge of the hill, it lingered for a minute longer before shooting directly upward into the sky. It wasn't very high up, maybe 1,000 or 2,000 feet in the air. I'll never forget the color of that magnetic rainbow-like force field. This took place on the west coast of British Columbia, on an island just south of Alaska. We were joined by 4 other friends, and when we spotted it, everyone observed as it hovered across the sky and then shot straight up, vanishing into the darkness. There was no sound, and the metallic rainbow-colored magnetic field surrounding it convinced us it wasn't an ordinary airplane or anything easy to explain. What if those strange flying objects really weren't from Earth, but from some other world, observing us from afar? The thought of it sends chills down my spine. Story 7. This might have just been an extremely vivid childhood dream, but every time I remember it, it never feels that way. At the time, I was a child and my mom was a single parent who worked the overnight shift. Despite the fact that it was completely against the law, she used to let me stay home alone overnight in our apartment. One night, I saw a strange creature in my bedroom. I hid under my blanket as I observed the thing tracing glowing lines along the wall near my door. I asked the thing what it meant, and inside my head it told me that I would eventually understand it someday. This was before I'd ever watched any movies or TV shows showing what aliens looked like. You know, the ones with the big eyes. But I don't think that creature was gray though. I somewhat remember it being a sickly greenish-white, but it did have large eyes. Story 8. This creepy encounter happened many years ago when I was just a teenager. I lived in my old house, tucked away in a quiet Texas neighborhood. It was around 10 p.m. and my dad and sister were out in the backyard while I was inside chilling and watching TV. Then, out of the blue, my sister rushed inside, wide-eyed with a mix of being scared and amusement. She told me to come out and see something mind-blowing. Feeling a bit freaked out, I followed her gaze and looked up at the night sky. In the dark night, right above our backyard, there hovered this massive circular thing which was about 75 feet wide. It hung there, only about 150 feet above the ground. It had these round lights all around it, giving off this weird glow like your classic UFO from the spookiest sci-fi stories. Fueled by curiosity and a need to capture this strange sight, I sprinted inside to grab my dad's camera. When I rushed back out, my family and I just stood there in silence, feeling seriously freaked out. The weird object slowly started moving, creeping towards our front yard. Minutes felt like hours. The tension in the night air left us almost suffocating as we hurried through the house to the front yard. It took us just a few minutes, but when we got there, the object was gone, vanished without a trace. It disappeared into the empty night like a ghost fading into the dark. The memories of that spooky night stuck with us, giving us the creeps every now and then. To this day, the mystery remains an unsolved puzzle that keeps us wondering about the unknown. Story 9. I really felt the need to sit down one day and write in detail about what my friend and I witnessed one chilling night. Each time I come across this question, I've been itching to share it. But for now, I'll provide the essence of it, and perhaps someday I'll go into the full story. My friend and I were on the back porch of a house we were renting. He exclaimed, "Oh my goodness." And I turned my gaze in the direction he was looking, up at the night sky. There we spotted two incredibly intense lights, and moving in the sky. One was directly above the other. I swiftly glanced over to where the North Star was, because I enjoy stargazing and knew its location at the time of night, to compare the brightness. Those lights were far brighter. They remained stationary for about 20 to 30 seconds, and then suddenly, the topmost light shot upward and diagonally to the right from its original position at an astonishing speed. It left a streak across the night sky. The second light beneath it slowly faded away afterward. The whole experience left a mark on us, as if we had glimpsed something beyond our understanding, something that didn't belong to our world. We couldn't explain it then, and even now the memory continues to haunt us, a reminder of the mysterious and unexplained. How will the first contact with aliens be like? Will they be on our side, or will they be our doom? If you're still here, that means you're ready to brave the darkness. Go ahead and watch the next one. Story 2 is a nightmare. I'll see you there, if you dare.